For 33 years, I prepared Christmas Eve dinner, only to be told I was no longer of any use. The message arrived when I least expected it, while I was arranging the final details on a table I knew would be empty once again. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would tell. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. You'll be helping me to continue unburdening myself. My name is Eleanor, and I live in a 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood in Chicago. That morning, on the 24th of December, I woke up as I always do, at 6 o'clock sharp, with aching joints and a heart heavy with a hope that no longer made sense to hold on to. My faded floral robe dragged across the cold tile floor, and my worn-out slippers made that dry sound that echoes in empty houses. The kitchen smelled of bleach and loneliness. On the wooden table, I had left the shopping list for Christmas dinner prepared. A standing rib roast, a honey-baked ham, pecan pies from a local bakery, festive Christmas cookies. The same dishes I had cooked for more than 3 decades, hoping that my son Michael, my daughter-in-law Jessica, and my 2 grandchildren would come for dinner. But deep down in my soul, I already knew what was going to happen. The phone rested silently on the small table in the living room, next to the family photographs I had placed with so much love years ago. In the largest one, Michael was hugging me on his wedding day, smiling with a joy I thought would last forever. Jessica looked radiant in her white dress, promising me she would treat me like a second mother. "Eleanor, you will never be alone as long as we are here," she had whispered in my ear during the reception. What a painful lie that promise turned out to be. I dialed her number with trembling fingers. The first call went straight to voicemail. The second one did too. On the third, Jessica answered with a tone that chilled my blood. "What do you want now, Eleanor?" "Honey, I just wanted to confirm the time for dinner. I've had the roast in the oven since 5 in the morning, and I made those sugar cookies that Michael loves so much. Look, I told you last year and the year before, we're not coming. You've already lived your life. Now let us live ours in peace. We have dinner at my parents' house, where there's a real family atmosphere. Not like your house, full of old photos and depressing memories." I felt as if a knife had been plunged into my chest. My fingers involuntarily released the photograph I was holding in my free hand. The glass shattered against the tile floor. "But, Jessica, they're my grandchildren. It's Christmas Eve. I just want to see them." "Your grandchildren are fine without the dramatic grandmother who's always crying and complaining about everything. Caleb and Chloe need joy, not pity, and Michael agrees with me. He's tired of your melodramas too. Is Michael there? Can I speak with him?" An eternal silence. Then, my son's harsh voice. "Mom, that's enough. Every year, it's the same story. Jessica is right. You've always been so intense, so smothering. We need our space. Besides, my kids need to grow up without emotional baggage. Your house smells old. It smells like sadness. That's not the environment we want for them." The words of my own son pierced me like broken glass. Your house smells old. It smells like sadness. The house where he had grown up, where he had played catch in the backyard, where he had cried when his hamster died, where he had brought Jessica for the first time to introduce her as his girlfriend. "Michael, I'm your mother, and I'm a father now. My responsibility is to my family. You've served your purpose. Now it's time to rest." He hung up. I stood motionless, holding the receiver to my ear, listening to the intermittent dial tone that confirmed the connection had been cut. Just as every real bond with the family I had created, nurtured, and loved for 47 years had been cut, the roast was burning in the oven. The smell of scorched meat mixed with the cinnamon aroma of the Christmas sweets I had prepared the night before. I walked to the kitchen like a ghost, turned off the oven, and took out the pan. The skin on the roast was black, completely ruined, just like my hope. I sat on the kitchen floor, surrounded by the pieces of the broken frame, and for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I had no more tears to shed. There was only emptiness, a black hole where the heart of a mother and grandmother used to beat. In that terrible stillness, I began to remember. I remembered the sleepless nights when Michael had a fever as a child. I remembered the loans I took out to pay for his engineering degree. I remembered the $50,000 I took from my savings to help them with the down payment on their condo in Lincoln Park. I remembered the afternoons I spent watching Caleb and Chloe when they were babies so Jessica could go back to work. Above all, I remembered the last 33 Christmases, eating alone, waiting for a call that never came, a text that was never sent, a visit that never materialized. As I sat on the cold floor, surrounded by broken glass and broken dreams, something began to change inside of me. A small seed, barely perceptible, but real. For the first time in decades, I wasn't blaming myself. I wasn't asking myself what I had done wrong to deserve this abandonment. Instead, I was asking myself something completely different. Why had I allowed them to treat me like this for so long? Outside, the bells of St. James Church began to ring, announcing that Christmas Eve had officially arrived. Neighbors greeted each other on the street, loaded with gifts and smiles. Children ran in their new coats, and families headed toward houses where tables full of love and hot food awaited them. I was still sitting in my empty kitchen, but something was being born inside me, something that had been waiting 33 years to awaken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the master bed I had shared with my husband, Arthur, for 20 years, staring at the water stains on the ceiling that I had never dared to fix because I had to save for the grandchildren's expenses. The heat was on low, as always, because every dollar I didn't spend on myself was a dollar I could send to Michael's account when he asked for help. And boy, had he asked for help over the years. I closed my eyes, and the images came like a painful avalanche. I remembered that February morning in 2010, when Michael showed up at my door with red eyes and a crumpled paper in his hand. It was a foreclosure notice. His consulting firm had just gone bankrupt, and he had co-signed a personal loan for $80,000. "Mom, I'm going to lose everything," he had cried like a child who had fallen off his bike. "Jessica is pregnant with Caleb. We can't end up on the street. Only you can help me." I didn't have $80,000, but I had the house. I mortgaged it without a second thought, putting it up as collateral so the bank would lend my son the money. Arthur had died 3 years earlier, and that house was the only thing I had left of him. But what was an empty house compared to the happiness of my only son? "I'll pay you back, Mom. I swear." In 2 years, tops, he had promised as he signed the papers that turned my home into a mortgaged property. 14 years had passed. The mortgage was still not fully paid off. But it wasn't just that. In 2012, when Chloe was born, Jessica had come to see me with that charming smile she knew how to put on when she needed something. "Eleanor, dear, we need your help again. The kids need to go to a good, private school. It costs $800 a month each, but it's an investment in their future. You understand, right? As a grandmother, you want the best for them. $800 for each grandchild. $1,600 a month. My widow's pension was $950 monthly. I had to find a job cleaning offices at night, at the age of 62, to supplement the expenses. My knees were destroyed going up and down stairs. My back bent from carrying buckets of water. But every month, I punctually transferred that $1,600 so Caleb and Chloe could go to the best school in the area. "It's temporary, Eleanor," Jessica would tell me every time I mentioned how hard it was to keep up that pace. "Michael is going to get a promotion soon, and then we'll be able to handle it ourselves." The promotion never came. Or it came, but there were always new expenses. The school uniforms, the private English lessons, the extracurricular activities, summer camp on the East Coast, always something more. I sat up in bed and walked to Arthur's desk, where I kept all the receipts and transfer slips in an old shoebox. I opened it with trembling hands and began to do the math. The yellowed papers told a story of limitless generosity and non-existent gratitude. March 2013, $3,000 for Michael's new car. It's for his job, Mom. A consultant needs to project a good image. July 2014, $5,000 for the family vacation to Florida. The kids need to breathe the sea air, Eleanor. It's for their health. December 2015, $2,500 for Christmas presents. We want Caleb and Chloe to have a special Christmas, like the ones you gave us. A Christmas I spent completely alone because they were too tired after opening the presents I had paid for. The numbers danced before my tired eyes. In total, over 14 years, I had given my son and his family more than $200,000. $200,000 that had come from my home's mortgage, from my life savings, from the extra hours working as a cleaner until I was 70, from dinners of canned tuna so I could save every penny. And yet, when I called to ask them to visit, they always had excuses. Michael was too busy with work. Jessica had a migraine. The kids had homework. The traffic was impossible. It was raining too hard. It was too hot. I remembered the last time they had come to the house. It had been in April. 8 months ago. Jessica had walked in with that expression she made when she disliked something, barely touching the furniture with her fingertips as if it might infect her. "Eleanor, this house urgently needs a renovation," she had said, wrinkling her nose. "It smells musty. The furniture is outdated, and the kitchen looks like it's from the 70s. The kids get bored here. There's no Wi-Fi, no flat-screen TV. There's nothing they like." She had paused, looking at the photographs of Arthur I had on the sideboard, and had added with a sigh of annoyance, "Besides, all these pictures of dead people and memories of the past make them sad." Caleb asked me why his grandmother lives surrounded by ghosts. Michael had remained silent, looking at his cell phone, occasionally nodding at his wife's words. When he finally spoke, it was to deliver the final blow. "Mom, maybe you should think about selling this house and moving into a nursing home. You'd have more company, you'd be with people your own age, and we wouldn't have to worry about you constantly." Worry about me? When had they shown the slightest concern for my well-being, my loneliness, my health? That visit had lasted exactly 45 minutes. They had left after a quick coffee, taking the honey-baked ham I had bought especially for them. Caleb, who was 13 at the time, had come over to say goodbye and had whispered in my ear, "Grandma, why does Mom say your house smells weird? I like the smell of the cookies you make." But Jessica had called him before I could answer. "Caleb? Let's go. We're going to be late for your cousin's birthday." There was no cousin's birthday. I knew because the next day, Jessica had posted photos on Facebook of them having dinner at a Japanese restaurant in downtown Chicago. An expensive restaurant. A restaurant I had indirectly paid for with my monthly transfers. I went back to bed with the box of receipts in my hands, feeling like an idiot. An old idiot who had mistaken being useful for being loved. An idiot who had believed that money could buy the affection of her own family. Outside, Chicago was slowly waking up on this Christmas day. The first buses were running down Michigan Avenue, carrying the few people who had to work on this holiday. The bakeries would soon open to sell holiday pastries to families who would celebrate together. Families that truly loved each other, not like mine. I lay there, clutching that box full of proof of my own foolishness. And for the first time in my life, I wondered what would have happened if I had said no. If I had kept my money for myself. If I had fixed the water stain on the ceiling. If I had bought new clothes. If I had traveled. If I had lived. But it was too late for those questions. Or so I thought then. The dawn light filtered through the faded curtains as I finally closed my eyes. In my dreams, Arthur said something to me that I couldn't remember upon waking, but it left a strange feeling in my heart, as if something was about to change forever. The days after Christmas passed in a gray haze. I would get up, have coffee and toast for breakfast, watch the morning news where they talked about Christmas cheer and family gatherings, and then I would sit on the sofa for hours, looking out the window at the neighbors returning from their celebrations, loaded with bags of leftovers and gifts. Mrs. Carroll, who lived in the apartment across the street, had had her 3 daughters visiting all week. From my window, I could see them coming and going, how the grandchildren ran down the hallway, how she smiled on the balcony as she hung the laundry she had done for the whole family. Her face radiated that satisfaction that only solid family bonds provide, that peace I had lost so long ago I couldn't remember what it felt like. On December 28th, I received a message that would change everything forever. I was making myself a cup of chamomile tea when my cell phone buzzed. A WhatsApp message from Jessica. My heart involuntarily sped up, as it always did when I received news from the family. Maybe they had reflected on Christmas. Maybe they wanted to apologize. Maybe the kids had asked about me. I opened the message with trembling hands. "Michael, don't forget to tell your mother to transfer us the $2,000 for the New Year's trip to Aspen. With everything we've spent on Christmas, we're short. And tell her not to be dramatic like always. We know she has money saved up. These old women always say they have nothing, but then the savings appear. Tell her if she doesn't help, the kids won't be able to ski and it will be her fault. I froze reading those words. The message wasn't for me. Jessica had sent it to the wrong chat, sending it to me instead of Michael. But there was more. I kept reading, and every word was like a lash. By the way, I told your sister Margaret that your mom is making up the loneliness thing to manipulate us. That she chooses to be alone because she's a bitter person. Margaret told me her mother-in-law is the same way, that these old women play the victim to get attention. Your mom could go out, join clubs, have a social life, but she prefers to stay home crying to make us feel guilty. The letters blurred before my eyes. I had to sit down in a kitchen chair because my legs were trembling, but there was still more. The last paragraph destroyed me completely. Good thing I found that nursing home out in the suburbs that only costs $1,200 a month. When she dies, we can sell her house, pay for the home for a few years, and keep the rest. The kids need an inheritance, not to support an old woman who only knows how to complain. I already talked to Caleb and explained that Grandma is getting old and that it's normal for grandparents to go live with other old people. He told me he didn't care. I remained motionless for I don't know how long. The chamomile tea grew cold in the cup without me noticing. The words echoed in my head like a nightmare. When she dies, only knows how to complain. He didn't care. My own daughter-in-law had spoken to my 13-year-old grandson about my death, as if it were something desirable, planned, a solution to their financial problems. She had calculated how much it would cost to get rid of me and how much money they would have left over. And Caleb, my beloved grandson, whom I had cared for as a baby, whom I had taken to Lincoln Park hundreds of afternoons, for whom I had bought all his school books and uniforms, had replied that he didn't care if they locked me away in a home. He didn't care. I reread the message once, twice, 3 times, hoping I had misunderstood, but the words were there, crystal clear, brutal in their honesty. It wasn't a message written in anger. It was a calculated conversation, a cold planning of my future without consulting me, without considering me, without caring what I felt or wanted. This old woman, they had called me, as if I were no longer Eleanor, as if I were no longer a person with a name and feelings, just an annoying obstacle to be moved out of the way. The phone fell from my hands and crashed onto the kitchen floor. The screen spiderwebbed with cracks, but it kept working like me, broken, but still functional. I stood up slowly and walked to the mirror in the entryway. The woman looking back at me was 75 years old, with deep wrinkles around her eyes, gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, the comfortable but disheveled clothes of someone who has stopped taking care of herself because no one is looking. She was a woman who had aged serving others, giving herself to others, sacrificing for others, and others had discarded her like an old piece of furniture that was no longer useful. But in that moment, looking at myself in the mirror, something shifted inside me. It wasn't a sudden or dramatic transformation. It was like tightening a nut that has been loose for years. Suddenly, it clicks and stays in place. I went back to the kitchen, picked up the broken phone, and dialed Michael's number. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. On the 3rd call, he picked up, his voice irritated. "What is it, Mom? I'm in an important meeting." I received a message from Jessica that wasn't for me, I said with a calmness that surprised even myself. There was a long silence. Too long. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally muttered, but there was panic in his voice. "I know about the nursing home in the suburbs. I know about selling my house when I die. I know you told Caleb that he didn't care if they put me away." Another silence. Then his voice changed. It became aggressive, defensive. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. Jessica was just thinking about your well-being. You can't keep living alone, and we can't be constantly looking after you. A nursing home would be best for everyone. Best for everyone, or most convenient for you? Mom, please, don't turn this into a Greek tragedy. You're old, you need care, and we have our own responsibilities. The kids, work, the mortgage. The mortgage I had been paying for years. The children I had been supporting. The job he had saved with my money. And the $2,000 for Aspen? I asked. He was quiet again. When he spoke, his voice was different, cold, like Jessica's. "Mom, if you don't want to help us, Just say so. But don't make us feel guilty for living our lives. We've done enough for you. Enough for me? Yes. Enough. We call you when we can. We visit when we have time. Not all children do that. You should be grateful, instead of constantly complaining. He hung up. I stood there in the kitchen, the cracked phone in my hand, and for the first time in 33 years of abandonment and humiliation, I didn't cry. I didn't blame myself. I didn't make excuses for their behavior. Instead, I walked to the living room and sat in Arthur's armchair. I looked at the family photos that Jessica said depressed the children, the memories she considered ghosts of the past. And then I made a decision that would change everything. I opened the drawer where I kept my address book and looked for a number I hadn't dialed in years. My sister-in-law, Margaret's, Arthur's sister, who lived in Denver. Margaret, who had lost touch with me when Arthur died, but had always been a strong, independent woman. I called her. Eleanor? What a surprise. How are you? For the first time in decades, I decided to tell the whole truth. Margaret listened in silence for 40 minutes. I told her everything. The 33 lonely Christmases. The $200,000 I had given Michael. Jessica's mistaken message. The phone call where my son had hung up on me. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Eleanor, for God's sake, she finally murmured. How could you put up with that for so long? Because they're my family, Margaret. They're all I have left of Arthur. No, Eleanor. All you have left of Arthur is yourself. And that strong woman I knew years ago. The one who worked at the textile mill and raised Michael on her own when Arthur was working night shifts at the hospital. That Eleanor would never have let herself be walked all over like this. Her words hurt because they were true. There was a previous Eleanor, a woman who made decisions, who knew how to say no, who had dignity. When had that version of me disappeared? What do I do now, Margaret? I don't even know who I am anymore. Tomorrow, you get on a flight and come to Denver to stay with me. You need to get away from that toxic situation and think clearly. You have my home, my couch, and all the time in the world to decide what to do with the rest of your life. But I didn't have to wait until the next day for my family to react. 2 hours after hanging up with Margaret, the calls started. The first was from Michael, with a syrupy voice I hadn't heard in years. Mom, forgive me for how I spoke to you earlier. I've been so stressed with work. You know how it is this time of year. Jessica explained the message to me. It was a misunderstanding. She was joking with her sister. You know how she is. Always exaggerating when she talks. Joking about putting me in a nursing home and taking my inheritance. Mom, please, don't see it that way. Jessica loves you very much. She just doesn't express herself well sometimes. Look, why don't you come over for dinner tomorrow? We'll make that lasagna you love, and we can talk everything out calmly. It was the first invitation I had received in 8 months. What a coincidence that it arrived right after I discovered their true intentions. No, Michael, I'm not coming. What do you mean you're not coming? Mom, we're family. We talk about these things face to face, not over the phone. Families don't secretly plan to put their mothers in nursing homes. Families don't calculate how much money they'll inherit when their parents die. Mom, you're misinterpreting everything. Jessica was being honest for the first time in years. And so were you. When you told me I had done enough for you, I hung up before he could respond. The second call came an hour later. It was Jessica, and for the first time in years, her voice sounded nervous. Eleanor, dear, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. That message wasn't what it seemed. I was talking to my sister about her mother-in-law's situation, not about you. You know how WhatsApp is. Sometimes conversations get mixed up. Jessica, the message clearly said, tell your mother. It talked about my grandchildren, my house, Caleb. Oh, Eleanor, you always take everything the wrong way. Always looking for conflict where there is none. Look, why don't you come over tomorrow and we'll clear everything up? Caleb is asking about you. Caleb, my 13-year-old grandson who, according to her, said he didn't care if they locked me away, was actually asking about me? Because according to your message, he doesn't care what happens to me. Eleanor, Caleb is a teenager. You know how they are. But deep down, he loves you very much. In fact, he asked me to invite you for New Year's Eve. You're lying, Jessica. You lie as naturally as you breathe. There was a tense silence. Then, Jessica's voice changed completely. It became cold, calculating, real. Look, Eleanor, let's be honest. You're old. You live alone and you need help. We have our own responsibilities, and we can't be constantly looking after an old woman who complains all the time. A nursing home would be the best thing for everyone. You would be cared for. We could live in peace. And the children wouldn't have to carry the guilt of a depressive grandmother. And you two could keep my house. Your house needs over $50,000 in renovations. Frankly, it's more of a burden than a benefit. But yes, if you weren't here, we could sell it and use the money for the children's future. Don't you think that's more useful than maintaining an empty house for a woman who won't be living much longer? Her words cut through me like blades. A woman who won't be living much longer. She spoke of me as if I were already dead. You're a monster, Jessica. I'm practical, Eleanor, and you should be too. Stop clinging to a life that no longer makes sense and allow your family to move on. This time, she was the one who hung up. I was left trembling on the couch, the phone in my hand. In less than 3 hours, I had seen the two faces of my family. The sweet, manipulative mask they put on when they needed something, and the real, cruel, and calculating face they showed when they felt exposed. But it wasn't over. At 9 o'clock at night, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Caleb, my grandson, with a backpack on his shoulder and a troubled look on his face. Behind him, Michael was gesturing from the car, telling him what to say. I opened the door. "Hi, Grandma," Caleb said with a forced smile. "Mom told me you misunderstood some things, and Dad brought me over so we could talk." I looked toward the car. Michael waved at me as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't hung up on me twice in one day. "Can I come in?" Caleb asked. I let him in. He sat on the couch with the stiffness of someone carrying out a mission he doesn't fully understand. "Grandma, Mom says you're upset because you think we don't love you, but that's not true. I love you a lot." "Really, Caleb?" "Yeah, of course. And Dad says that if you want, you can come with us to the mall next weekend. We could go to the movies." The poor boy recited the words like an actor who has memorized a script, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine, and his hands nervously fiddled with the zipper of his backpack. "Caleb, has your mother told you anything about a nursing home?" The boy stiffened. His cheeks turned red. She. "Well, tell me the truth, son. Mom said that maybe it would be better if you lived with people your own age, that you'd have more company, and that we could visit you on weekends. And what do you think about that?" Caleb looked down. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Mom says that old people get sad when they live alone, and that they're better off in nursing homes. She says it's normal, that all grandparents go there when they get really old. And do you think I'm really old?" "I don't know, Grandma. Mom says you are, that you can't take care of yourself anymore." I looked at this 13-year-old boy, indoctrinated by his mother to see me as a burden, as a problem to be solved. Caleb had been my darling for years, but now I saw in his eyes the indifference that Jessica had patiently sown. "Caleb, do you know how much money I've spent on your education all these years? Mom says money doesn't matter, that grandparents have an obligation to help their families. And what obligation do you have to me?" He shrugged. "I don't know, visit you, I guess." "Oh, when was the last time you visited me without your parents making you?" Caleb thought for a long moment, frowning. "I don't remember," he finally admitted. And in that honest answer from a 13-year-old boy, I understood that I had lost my family long before that day, that for years I had been buying attention with money, confusing obligation with affection, emotional blackmail with love. "Caleb, tell your father he can go. You can stay a little longer if you want, but not because he asked you to, but because you really want to be with me." The boy looked toward the window, where Michael's car was still waiting. "Honestly, Grandma, I have an online PlayStation game with my friends at 10. If you don't mind, I didn't mind. Nothing mattered to me in the way it had before." "Of course, son, go on." Caleb got up with visible relief and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, like someone following protocol. "See you later, Grandma." See you later, Caleb. I watched him get into the car and drive away with his father. I closed the door and leaned against it, processing what had just happened. In a single day, I had seen the whole truth. My family had shown me, without their masks, who they really were and what place I held in their lives. I was not the beloved grandmother, nor the respected mother, nor the woman who deserved dignity. I was a walking bank account, an obstacle between them and my inheritance, a nuisance to be managed as efficiently as possible. But I had also discovered something more important, that I was no longer afraid to see them for who they were. And that, surprisingly, made me feel free for the first time in decades. That night, I slept for 7 hours straight for the first time in years. I didn't wake up at 3 in the morning, worrying if Michael might need money for some unforeseen expense. I didn't get up at 5 thinking about what I could cook to tempt them to visit. I didn't spend the night replaying conversations I never had, imagining ways to win back an affection that never existed. I woke up at 8:30 in the morning on December 30th with a strange feeling in my chest. It took me a few minutes to identify it. Peace. A deep sense of peace. Like when you finally stop fighting a current that's dragging you under and decide to swim in another direction. I got up. I took a slow shower. And for the first time in months, I put on the blue blouse I had bought last year and had never dared to wear because it was too elegant for being home alone. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw a 75-year-old woman who had the right to dress nicely for herself without needing to impress anyone or justify her decisions. I ate breakfast at the dining room table instead of standing in the kitchen, as I had done for years out of habit. I put out the good tablecloth, took out the porcelain dishes I saved for special visitors, and prepared a breakfast like the old days. Coffee with milk, toast with tomato and olive oil, fresh orange juice. I took my time, savored every bite, and didn't turn on the television to fill the silence. The silence no longer scared me. After breakfast, I did something I had been putting off for years. I called the bank. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "Good morning, my name is Eleanor Morales. I need to cancel all the automatic transfers from my account." "One moment, please. Are you referring to automatic bill payments?" "No, I'm referring to the transfers I make every month to my son Michael Morales' account." There was a pause. I heard the clacking of a keyboard. "I see you have monthly transfers set up for the amount of $1,600. Do you wish to cancel them?" "Yes, all of them. And I also want to be notified if anyone tries to make charges to my account without my express authorization. I want to sign whatever is necessary so that no one but me can touch my money." "Of course, Mrs. Morales. Could you stop by the branch this morning? You'll need to bring your ID and sign some documents." I grabbed my purse, left the house, and walked to the bank branch on Clark Street. The Chicago air was cold but crisp, and every step felt like a small victory. I wasn't going to the bank to withdraw money for others, but to protect my money for myself. The manager, a young woman named Lauren, greeted me professionally and explained all the changes I could make. "Mrs. Morales, I also see that you have a mortgage on your home that is almost paid off. There's only about $15,000 left. With the savings you have in your account, you could pay it off completely if you wish. $15,000. An amount that would have once seemed impossible to gather, but that I now had available because I hadn't sent transfers to my family for a month. Yes, I want to pay off the mortgage. Today. Perfect. I can also set up a new debit card with higher security limits, and I recommend you activate SMS notifications for any activity on your account." While Lauren prepared the paperwork, she gave me a piece of information that left me frozen. "By the way, I see that last month there was an attempt to access your online account from another device. The system blocked it automatically. But do you know anything about that?" "No, I don't have an online account. I don't know how to use those things. Someone tried to access it using your personal information. Probably someone who knows your social security number and other basic details. Have you shared that information with any family members?" "Michael." Of course, it was Michael. He had tried to get into my online bank account to see exactly how much money I had, or worse, to make transfers without me noticing. "Yes, I know who it was," I murmured. "Can you do anything to prevent it?" "It's already been done. We've changed all your security credentials and set up a 2-factor authentication system." No one will be able to access it without you personally authorizing each transaction. I left the bank feeling like a different woman. For the first time in years, my money was truly mine. My house was completely mine, and my decisions were exclusively mine. On the way home, I stopped at the Green City Market. It had been months since I'd gone, having fallen into the routine of buying only the essentials at the supermarket next door. But that day I wanted good tomatoes, real prosciutto, artisanal olives, and a sharp cheddar cheese. For how many people? Beautiful? The man at the deli counter asked me. For one, I replied without shame. For me, that's great. A woman who takes care of herself. I like to see that. I bought ingredients to make myself a real dinner, not a survival meal. I bought flowers for the living room table. I bought a bottle of red wine because I felt like having a glass with dinner and didn't have to explain myself to anyone. When I got home, the bags were heavy, but it was a pleasant weight. The weight of having chosen, of having indulged, of having decided to give myself the luxury of eating well without guilt. I put the flowers in a vase that had been stored in a closet for years. The living room was instantly transformed. It was no longer the sad room of an abandoned woman, but the welcoming space of a woman who had decided to take care of herself. At 2 p.m, the phone rang. Michael. Mom, I just spoke with the bank. They told me you canceled the transfers. That's right. May I ask why? Do you know that Caleb starts the new term in 2 weeks and needs new books? Caleb and his books are his parents' responsibility, not mine. Mom, you can't do this. What's going to happen with the school? With the house expenses? I don't know, Michael. It's not my problem anymore. Of course it's your problem. We're your family. My family planned a future for me in a nursing home without consulting me. My family calculated how much money they would inherit when I died. My family told my grandson it didn't matter if they locked me away because it was normal for old grandparents to disappear. Mom, that was a misunderstanding. No, Michael, it was the truth. For the first time in years, someone told me the truth about what you think of me. So what are we supposed to do now? How are we going to pay for private school? You can send the kids to a public school. You can cut back on your expenses. You can work more hours. You can do what the rest of normal people do. Live within your means. Mom, don't be cruel. Jessica is pregnant again. She can't work more hours. Jessica was pregnant. Another mouth to feed. Another child I would have to support while they took the credit for being parents. Congratulations, I said in a completely neutral voice. I hope you'll be very happy with your third child. Is that all you're going to say? Your new granddaughter or grandson will need things. Will have more expenses. Not will have. You'll have. I am no longer part of that equation. Mom, please, reconsider. You know we love you, but we need your help. You need me. You don't love me. And for the second time in 2 days, I hung up on my son. But this time, instead of feeling guilt or sadness, I felt something completely new. Pride. That evening, I prepared the most elaborate dinner I had cooked in months. Roasted vegetables, grilled steak with peppers, and for dessert, homemade pudding just like I used to make when I was young. I poured myself a glass of wine, put classical music on the radio, and dined slowly, savoring every bite. There was no one waiting for me at home to ask why I was late. There was no one criticizing the food or comparing it to other places. There was no one asking me for money between courses. It was the first dinner in years where I felt completely present, completely in charge of my own life. After dinner, I took out a photo album I hadn't looked at in years. Photos of Arthur and me when we were young. Photos of our trips before Michael was born. Photos of happy moments when I didn't yet know that love could be used as blackmail. I had been a whole person before I became a mother. I had dreams, hobbies, friends. I had worked. I had traveled. I had been happy without needing to buy anyone's affection. That night, before going to bed, I did something I hadn't done in years. I planned the next day, not based on what my family might need, but based on what I wanted to do. Tomorrow I would call Margaret to tell her my decisions. Tomorrow I would go to the library to see what workshops they offered for people my age. Tomorrow I would start rebuilding the life I had abandoned for a family that had never valued me. and for the first time in 33 years, I fell asleep smiling. December 31st dawned with a leaden gray sky that threatened rain, but I woke up with an energy I hadn't felt in decades. It was the last day of the year that had marked the end of my old life, and I wanted to close it with dignity. At 9 in the morning, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Jessica, but this time she wasn't alone. She was holding Chloe's hand, my 11-year-old granddaughter, and behind them was Michael, carrying a suitcase. I opened the door but didn't step aside to let them pass. "Eleanor, we need to talk," Jessica said in a trembling voice. Her eyes were swollen as if she had been crying all night. "Please, let us in. It's cold out here." "Hi, Grandma," Chloe murmured, looking at me with big, confused eyes. The poor thing didn't understand what was happening. "Hello, sweetie," I replied, stroking her hair. Whatever poison her parents had put in her head, she was still an innocent child. "Mom, please," Michael insisted. "We need to talk to you urgently." I let them in, but this time I didn't run to the kitchen to make them coffee and cookies as I had for years. I stood in the living room, waiting to hear what new drama they had come to perform. Jessica perched on the edge of the sofa, nervously wringing her hands. Michael dropped the suitcase on the floor with a thud that echoed through the house. "Eleanor, we talked a lot last night," Jessica began, "and we realized we've made terrible mistakes, that we've treated you badly, that we haven't appreciated you." "Mom, it's true," Michael added. Jessica opened my eyes. "She made me see how selfish we've been with you." I looked at the two of them, performing this little play, and I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Did they really think I was foolish enough to swallow such a performance? Is that so? And what suddenly made you change your minds? Jessica looked down. "Well, it's just that, when you canceled the transfers, we realized how much we depended on you, and that made us reflect on how unfair it was." "You didn't realize how much you needed me," I corrected. "You realized how much you needed my money, which isn't the same thing." "Mom, don't be so harsh," Michael muttered. "We admit our mistakes. That's why we've come to ask for your forgiveness." "And the suitcase?" An uncomfortable silence filled the living room. Jessica and Michael exchanged a quick glance. "Well," Jessica finally said, "it's because we also wanted to propose something as a gesture of goodwill." "What gesture?" "That I come to live with you," Jessica announced with a forced smile. "To take care of you, to keep you company. That way you won't be alone, and we can have peace of mind knowing you're well looked after." I stared at her in disbelief. Had she really just offered to move into my house, as if it were a favor she was doing me? And Michael? "He would stay with the kids at our apartment," Jessica explained quickly. "At least until the baby is born. Then we'd figure out how to organize things." "I see. And who would pay the bills for this house with Jessica living here?" Another guilty silence. "Well, you have your pension," Michael muttered. "And we could help out where we could. With my money," I finished the sentence. "Because without my monthly transfers, you can't help with anything." "Eleanor, don't look at it like that," Jessica pleaded. "Think of it as an opportunity for us to be a real family. I would take care of the house, the shopping, the cooking, with my money, and you'd have company all the time," she insisted. "You wouldn't be lonely anymore. You wouldn't feel abandoned." I looked her straight in the eye. "Jessica, how long has it been since you've worked?" "What?" "Well, since Caleb was born, 13 years ago. But now I'm pregnant again, so 13 years without working. And now you want to come live in my house, have me pay all the bills, have me support you. And in return, you would do me the favor of keeping me company." It's not like that," she stammered. "Then what is it like?" Jessica fell silent. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, the financial situation is very difficult. With the pregnancy, Jessica can't work, and my salary alone isn't enough to support the whole family. We thought that if she were here with you, we could save on a lot of expenses and I would support all of you. It's not supporting. It's sharing family resources. Michael, have you ever supported me? Have you ever paid my bills, my food, my medicine, my utilities? Well, no, but have you ever taken me out to dinner at a restaurant, bought me clothes, paid for a vacation for me? Mom, we have a lot of expenses. The kids, The kids I've been paying for 13 years. The school I've financed. The vacations I've paid for. The mortgage I helped pay. Yes, but things are different now, Jessica interrupted. Now we really want to take care of you. Take care of me, or live off of me? Eleanor, don't be unfair, she protested. I would be here with you 24 hours a day. I'd cook the food you like. I'd clean the house. I'd help you with everything you need. Like a housekeeper? Like a daughter taking care of her mother-in-law. I started to laugh. A bitter but liberating laugh. Jessica, you have never treated me like a mother. Not even like a person. For 13 years you've treated me like a walking ATM. That's not true. Yes, it is. And now that the ATM is broken, you come offering yourself as a caregiver in exchange for me supporting you too. That's not it. Then what is it? Jessica fell silent, her cheeks flushed with shame and anger. Michael intervened. Mom, let's be practical. You're getting older, you live alone, and we need financial help. It's a solution that benefits all of us. Oh, really? And how exactly does it benefit me? You'd have company, care. You wouldn't be alone. Michael, I'm not alone by chance. I'm alone because you two abandoned me. Because for 33 years, you preferred to live your lives without including me. Because when I called you, you were always busy. Because when I invited you, you always had better plans. But it's different now, Jessica insisted. Yes, it's different now. Now you need me. Before, you only needed my money. Now, in addition, you need my house. That's not true. Jessica, how many times have you come to visit me this year just for the pleasure of being with me, without asking for money, without needing anything, just to spend time together? A deathly silence filled the room. And you, Michael? How many times have you come to see me just because you missed your mother? Another silence. But Chloe came, Jessica finally muttered, pointing to the girl who had remained silent all this time. Chloe likes being with you. I looked at my granddaughter, who was watching me with those big, sad eyes. Chloe, sweetie, do you like coming to Grandma's house? The girl looked nervously at her parents before answering. Mom says your house is very old and smells weird, she whispered. But I like the cookies you make. Jessica turned red. Chloe, don't say that. It's okay, I told the girl. You can tell the truth. Mom also says you're very dramatic and always complain about everything. But I don't think that. And what do you think? I think you're sad because nobody comes to see you. Out of the mouths of babes. Chloe had summarized in one sentence what her parents refused to acknowledge. You're right, sweetie. I have been very sad for many years. And you're not sad anymore? Now I'm starting to feel better. Jessica stood up abruptly. Eleanor, we need an answer. Are you going to help us or not? I looked at her with all the calm in the world. No. What do you mean, no? I am not going to support you. You are not coming to live in my house. I am not going to keep paying your bills. I am not going to continue being your financial solution. But we're your family, Michael stammered. A family that has treated me like a bank for 13 years. A family that planned to lock me in a nursing home to get my inheritance. A family that told a 13-year-old boy that it doesn't matter if his grandmother disappears. Mom, please? The answer is no, Michael. And it's final. Jessica grabbed the suitcase furiously. You're a selfish person. We offer to take care of you, and you refuse it. You're going to die alone and bitter. I'd rather die alone and in peace than live accompanied and exploited. She stormed toward the door like a fury. But before leaving, she turned to throw one last dart at me. Don't expect us to call you again. It's over. We gave you one last chance. Perfect, I replied with a smile. It was exactly what I had been waiting to hear. They left, slamming the door. Chloe looked back at me over her shoulder sadly before Jessica dragged her down the stairs. I was left alone in my living room, surrounded by a silence that, for the first time in years, didn't scare me. It was the silence of freedom. That night, as Chicago celebrated the arrival of the new year with fireworks and chimes, I toasted to myself with a glass of sparkling wine. For the first time in my life, I was completely alone on New Year's Eve. And for the first time in my life, it didn't hurt. It was the beginning of everything. The first days of January passed with a tranquility that felt strange but comforting. On January 2nd, keeping the promise I had made to myself, I called Margaret to tell her everything that had happened since our last conversation. Eleanor. I can't believe it, she murmured after hearing the whole story. They offered to have Jessica move in with you so you could support her. That's the height of cynicism. The worst part is that for a second, I actually considered if it would be better to accept, I admitted. The habit of giving in is very strong. But you didn't give in. That's what's important. No, not this time. And how do you feel now? I thought before answering. How did I feel? It was hard to explain. I feel empty, but in a good way, like when you clean out a closet full of old things you don't use. At first it seems too empty, but then you realize you have space for new things. Exactly. And now you have to fill that space with things you actually want. That same afternoon, I went to the public library. I hadn't set foot in one in over 10 years, since before Caleb and Chloe were born, and I became the family's official financial grandmother. The librarian, a mature woman with graying hair and a kind smile, greeted me enthusiastically when I explained that I wanted to find out about activities for people my age. How wonderful. We have so many options, she said, pulling several brochures from a drawer. A book club on Tuesday afternoons, a memory workshop on Thursdays, a basic computer class for seniors, an urban hiking group that meets every Saturday. As she spoke, I looked around. There were people of all ages reading, studying, browsing the internet. A group of older women were looking at cookbooks and laughing softly. 2 men were playing chess at a table by the window. It was an atmosphere of productive calm, of people doing things for the simple pleasure of doing them. Can I sign up for several activities? Of course. In fact, I recommend you start with the book club. They meet tomorrow afternoon, and they're a very welcoming group. They're always delighted to have new members. I left the library with 5 brochures in my hand and a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. I had appointments with myself, places to go that weren't the supermarket or the pharmacy, new people to meet who didn't know my story of family abandonment. On Tuesday afternoon, I arrived at the book club 5 minutes early. The chairs were arranged in a circle, and 6 people were already seated, chatting animatedly. A woman with platinum blonde hair and a contagious smile greeted me from across the circle. A new face. How wonderful. Come, sit here with me. I'm Grace. Eleanor. I introduced myself, taking a seat beside her. First time at the club? First time at any club, I admitted. I haven't done any social activities in years. Well, it's great that you've decided to start. This group is fantastic. We've been meeting for 5 years and we're like a little family now. Family. The word gave me a slight shudder, but Grace continued talking, oblivious. This month we're reading Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel. Have you read it? No, but I'd really like to. Perfect. I have an extra copy at home. I can lend it to you. For the next 2 hours, I listened to a group of 8 people passionately discuss literature, recipes, family traditions, and the way food can express feelings that words cannot. They didn't talk about money, or family obligations, or who should support whom. They talked about things they enjoyed, things that moved them, things that made them think. Eleanor, what do you think? David, a man in his 70s with a white beard and intelligent eyes, suddenly asked me, "Do you think the protagonist had the right to choose her own life, even if it meant breaking with family traditions?" The question caught me off guard. It had been so long since anyone had asked my opinion on anything that it took me a few seconds to respond. I think we all have the right to choose our own lives," I finally said, "even though sometimes it takes a lot of work to realize you have that right." Exactly, exclaimed Grace. It took me 60 years to understand that. I was also one of those women who lived to please everyone but themselves. Until one day I decided enough was enough. At the end of the session, Grace walked me to the library door. "Eleanor, it was lovely meeting you. You have a very interesting perspective on things. Thank you. I really enjoyed it too. Would you like to get coffee on Thursday after the memory workshop? You can tell me what you thought of the book. I'd love that." I walked back home feeling light, almost floating. I had spent 2 hours talking with strangers, and it had been one of the best afternoons I could remember in years. No one had asked me for money. No one had criticized my house. No one had implied I was a burdensome nuisance. They had simply valued my opinion and wanted to get to know me better. That night, as I was reading the first pages of Like Water for Chocolate, the phone rang. Michael's number appeared on the screen. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. I had nothing to say to him. 5 minutes later, it rang again. I didn't answer that time either. On the third call, I decided to pick up. "What do you want, Michael?" "Mom, we need to talk." "No, we don't need to talk. I've already said everything I had to say. Mom, please, just listen to me for a moment. Things have gotten very complicated for us. The landlord raised our rent by $300 a month. And without your help, we can't afford it." "And?" "What do you mean, and?" "Mom, we're going to have to move to a cheaper apartment if you don't help us. The kids will have to change schools. They'll lose all their friends." "Michael, how old are you?" 45. "Why? Because you talk like a teenager. You're a 45-year-old man, married, with 2 children, and another on the way. It's your responsibility to solve your financial problems, not mine." "But Mom, you're my mother." "Yes, I'm your mother, not your financial savior. Grandparents have always helped their families. It's normal. What's normal is for parents to support their children until they're adults, not for mothers to support their sons until they die. Mom, please, don't be cruel. We just need you to help with the difference in the rent. It's $300 a month. To you, that's nothing. To me, that's $300 I could spend on myself." "On yourself? What are you going to spend $300 on?" "On whatever I please. On books, on theater, on travel, on new clothes, on restaurants, on all the things I haven't done for years because I was supporting your family." "Mom, that's so selfish." "Selfish. Michael, I have spent over $200,000 on you too over 14 years. I mortgaged my house for you. I worked as a cleaner until I was 70 to pay for your children's school. I have given up having a life of my own to finance yours. And after all that, you have the nerve to call me selfish because I don't want to support you anymore. But we're desperate now. And I was desperate for 33 Christmases, waiting for a call from you that never came. And no one was concerned about my desperation. That's different." "No, Michael, it's exactly the same. The difference is that you never put a price on my desperation. Mom, if you don't help us, it will be your fault that your grandchildren suffer." There it was again. The same old emotional blackmail. Guilt as a weapon of manipulation. My grandchildren are going to suffer because their parents don't know how to live within their means. Because you have taught them that there's always someone else who will solve their problems. Because you have given them a life of luxury you couldn't afford. Maybe a little reality will do them good. Maybe they'll learn what it means to value things when they aren't just handed to them. I don't recognize you, Mom. What's happened to you? What's happened is that I've woken up, Michael. What's happened is that after 75 years, I've understood that my life is worth living too. And what about us? What about you? You're adults. Solve your problems like all the other adults in the world. Mom, if you don't help us this time, we're never going to call you again. Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. And for the 4th time in a week, I hung up on my son. But this time, instead of feeling sadness or guilt, I felt a sense of power I had never experienced before. For the first time in my life, I had put my own needs before others. For the first time, I had said no without apologizing. I returned to my book and my cup of tea. And I continued to read about a woman who cooked her emotions because she didn't know how to express them any other way. I had already begun to express mine with words, and it felt extraordinarily good.